Welcome back to another chat, our culture chats with Be Kind Life. Andy and Rachel here, and we are thrilled to introduce Valerie Sue into the family of our podcast people. Valerie works for Kaiser Permanente. She's the director of business operations and marketing strategy and sales operations. Valerie and her team manage the infrastructure and administration for that group. Valerie has had a long career, a seasoned professional with strong background in communication, survey research, data visualization, and leveraging technologies to expedite processes. And we love that. We love the process improvement work.
Thanks so much for the invite. And I have to say, I've missed you, Rachel. We worked pretty closely together, and I want to say it must have been pre-pandemic before, you left. And it just isn't the same without you. So I'm really glad to spend this time with you and to meet Andy.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. You've always been such a strong supporter with an eye on people and process, which is why we got along so well. Always looking to do things better and of course focused on the people. So the chief of staff role is a tricky one, right? The director of operations being in that supporting function. As we were prepping for today, we were talking a little bit about the unsung heroes, the folks in the background, the folks that do these supporting functions in service to more of these customer facing, revenue generating departments. And it's a challenge for lots of reasons, right? One being people are never sure what you do. Right? It's hard to go out there and tout your value. Secondly, right, because it's not really tied to revenue or the core business. Yeah. All right, go for it, Andy.
I'm like, but isn't it though? Because the support groups are what support moving indirectly. We like to call that indirect value, right? Because without them, things are not moving forward. And so I argue every member of an organization is actually moving towards or should be moving towards the sum total of the goals, including financial.
Well, of course, I'm going to agree with you, but I'm biased. I think what was funny when Rachel read my bio, the comment that you just made, it's completely related to it. What does it mean to support the infrastructure of a department? It's a running joke around my friends and family that everybody knows what everybody else does. So I have a really close friendship group, and one of them is a realtor, another is a kindergarten teacher, another teaches at a community college here. So when we go around and we say, what does everybody do? It's, teacher, realtor, coach, and they get to me, and I'm just what do I do? Because, and they like to tease me and they like to say, nobody knows what Valerie really does. So maybe she really works for the CIA and it's all very, hush.
Cloak and dagger.
Cloak and dagger, exactly. Because if I try to tell them what you read, I support the infrastructure of a department and we keep things going. It's they don't know what that means. Nobody knows what that means. Yeah. But to Andy's point, if we didn't do what we do, I'm not sure how well the department could function. My current boss once described our role as background singers. So, you've got the star performers in the front of the stage and we're there, keeping things going. So you don't really notice us until we're not there. And then all of a sudden, everything sounds a little bit hollow because you don't have the background singers. And I think, Andy, to your point, eventually, I don't know that the star performers can keep going without those background singers, but they don't know that until we're gone.
My analogy is a little bit different. Nobody recognizes all your plumbing pipes until the plumbing pipes are clogged or overflow. And then it's like, oh my gosh, how important are our plumbing pipes? Now, being a background singer is way cooler. But
I'm going with Valerie's analogy.
Yeah.
Think about
but I think it's the same kind of concept, right? It's these things don't function. Quite frankly, maybe no one should know who you are, in the sense that if you're actually supporting and doing the things that you need to be doing, things are functioning correctly. Yeah. It's only until something is a block or a break or, to your point, all of a sudden the sound is flat. And why doesn't the sound as dynamic? And, that type of thing, that you realize, we actually, I say this in the general concept, we don't always want to know what you do. We just want to know it's getting done. It's kind of like, I don't need to know how cell towers work. Just make sure my phone, when people call me, it's working, you know?
Yeah.
And the reality is, it's not always sexy, interesting, the kind of work that you want to shine a spotlight on and say, hey, look at this really cool thing. I mean, sometimes it is, but oftentimes it isn't, because that's what infrastructure is. We keep everything running, keep the trains running on time. People get to where they need to get to. There's no issue. But, it's like, okay, so you got the forms filled out. You got the submissions submitted on time. Everything is perfect. No issue at all. Oh, somebody actually had to do that, right? Because
That's right.
Currently we don't have bots. I mean, we're working on it, but we don't have bots that do all of these things for us. So it is an important, I think, unseen and often unsung function. Which, but I appreciate what you're saying, Andy, that that's okay, right? We shouldn't, and we don't care about we do care about the pipes.
We 100% care. Right.
Yeah.
I think in the concept of people understanding how important the work is means we have to promote it. We have to talk about it. We have to, the uncomfortable part for me personally, pat ourselves on the back. Like, hey, everything didn't explode today, people. Sometimes we have to do that because, and again, let's just use infrastructure just in the general sense. How many times are they cutting budgets to shoring up bridges, and then the bridge collapsed, and then everyone's like, why didn't they shore up the bridge? And it's like, well, you don't think about it. You cross the bridge every single day and you don't think someone has to do maintenance. Sometimes we have to fix things. Sometimes, all the stuff. So I do think it will be beneficial to sometimes talk about the pipes. Guys, we might need some new pipes. We might need some.
That's right. The less interesting but equally important piece of the infrastructure.
That's
for
right.
Sure.
That's right. That's why I was sort of like, it's not that it's not, and we don't want to talk about it. It's this weird thing of like, when we're not talking about it, it probably means it's all working, but we probably need to do we need to do better at talking about it so people understand why it's working.
Valerie, what's your favorite part of your role?
Oh, I think it's the diversity of things that I get to do. I'm somebody who can get bored quickly, or not, bored isn't necessarily the right word, but I like to be able to do different things from day to day. I don't want to always be doing the same thing, every single day. And so that's the whole jack of all trades, master of none concept in this kind of job. Yeah. So I have a schedule, I have a list, I have a roadmap, I have things that I need to get done, but it is pretty common that I'll log on at the beginning of the day and I'll get none of those things on my to-do list done because all of this other stuff that was completely unexpected came at me and it needed to be done right away. Yeah. So it's actually going back to how we started this. You have to be able to go from one meeting to the next, back to back, completely different topics, completely different even level of conversation, and adapt really quickly. And it's hard. It's hard to do, but I enjoy having lots of variety in what I'm doing. The other thing about it is, and this might be unique to my relationship with my boss, or I think it varies, because that relationship is a really important and a key thing to having success is the relationship with the person that you're working with, is that she pretty much allows me to do things differently. She's not somebody who will say, oh no, you must keep doing whatever you're doing in the same way. And one of the things that fuels me and it makes it interesting is I like to look for those opportunities to improve or do things differently or streamline. And nowadays we are trying a lot of things with automation and trying to get a little bit faster and more efficient. And she's just given me pretty much carte blanche to say, yeah, if you see something that's broken or that you can do better, just do it. And that's fun. So I enjoy that. And I enjoy it when people come and say, I have a problem. I can't figure out how to solve this. Do you have any ideas? So that consultant relationship with members of the team and trying to help them get to either a better process or fix one that's broken, that's really fun for me. I enjoy that.
Yeah, I love that you said jack of all trade, master of none. And I feel like at one point in life, this was almost like a negative thing. Like you like focus in, hone in to be, get your specialty. But the reality is, and I think we spoke with another chief of staff, is if you don't have a person that knows all the things that are going on, they can't be specialists. There's too much information to know. So they got to know all that. They've got to be able to see the big picture, the highlights, the big parts, and be able to point out these things are going to collide. Now, you subject matter experts go figure out how to fix that. But you can actually take a step back and see the full forest without just trying to focus on one tree. And I think that depending on people's personalities and who they are and how they function and operate, you need this combination of both. If you have a bunch of subject matter experts, people end up so narrowly focused on their one thing. And life is just not that. It's dynamic, right? So we're championing that
Generalist.
master of none, jack of all trades.
I say that, but it's not 100% true, because I think each of us comes to this job with the generalist orientation
Capability.
But we do also, I think, all have a specialty. And I see that in the way the job gets interpreted. So at our organization, it's if you look at the job description, it's very generic in a lot of ways in the way that it's described. So yes, you have to, have your hands in lots of different pies, and you have to understand lots of things at a certain level. But there is a need, and it comes across to know certain things at a different level. For example, some of my colleagues in this position, they come with more of a finance or a sort of quantitative background. And you see that because they have the same job title as me, they do the same work, but they're heavily into the finance piece and the budget work. And that's their thing, because they come with that orientation. Others are more of like the HR, bent, and that's their specialty. And they have to do the finance work too, but they don't go deep. They do what's needed, and they go deep on the HR piece. For me, I come with sort of a survey research. So my immediate job right before this one was in national market research, specifically doing survey, lots of surveys. So I come with that orientation. So that's sort of my area of depth. So when anything having to do with research or surveys in particular comes up, that's where I go all in, and I do more than probably my colleagues who focus on finance or HR. So yeah, I think you kind of need both in a sense. And I think everybody has that because you have that thing that's either the passion or the skill or the experience or whatever that depth is. And it shows through. And I think you can't help but have it show through.
Which is what's great about the job, I think, because there is an opportunity to go deep on the stuff that you enjoy. It's not so structured. Do you think depending on who the executive hires for that role depends on what their skills are and, what the department needs, right? Somebody to counterbalance, or the department's not particularly good at this, so we're going to need to find somebody who's a little bit more, any of those things that you talked about?
I think my biased perspective is the smart executive will choose somebody who has a complementary skill set. So they know their own weaknesses and where they need help, and they choose somebody who has the complement to that and can help them in those areas. I think it's not less successful. It'll be successful, but probably less useful to choose somebody who's got your exact skill set and who is strong in the same areas, because you've already got that covered. So, if communication is your area where you struggle, then maybe it's a good idea to hire somebody who is strong in that area and help you with that. If it's finance and that's the place that you're struggling, maybe find somebody who is really strong in that and bring that. And, that doesn't always happen, even though that's a smart thing, that doesn't always happen because of, I'm sure you two know very well, we tend to gravitate towards people who are more like us than dissimilar to us. Yeah. So I get it. And I'm the same way. Certainly among my friends, you try to get people who are more like you to be around you because they agree with you. And who doesn't like that?
But I do think in leadership that emotional intelligence is critical, right? Because you really have to be able to know and kind of understand. And I think it's cultural too, like within an organization, but to really know and understand what your flaws are. I think I'll speak for myself. I have worked in a ton of organizations, and I would say we're definitely flip-flopped. It's probably, 30-70, where a leader is in tune with, I'm not good at that. I'm not good at that, and I need to hire that to close that gap. I think we have such a different structure, particularly here in the United States, where it's like, I'm just going to pretend like I know everything. It's sort of like this idea of
humility is not a thing.
I can't really
it's something we're working towards.
Well, and culturally, I can't speak to my weakness because then everyone's going to be talking about that, right? It's going to be like, well, you're not good, like the concept of you're not good enough versus the idea that nobody is extraordinary at everything. Yeah. I'm not going to say nobody, but it's such a small percentage of people that most of us are not going to be extraordinary at everything. And so it's okay to say, I know, Rach. Here's the thing. You're in that small percentage I was talking about.
That's right.
But I think it's really the ability to develop the courage to like raise your hand, or if you're a leader, to say, I need to get someone here who can kind of close that gap for me. Yeah, I totally agree.
And that requires a good amount of self-reflection, right? You have to spend the time to think about, what am I not so good at? What are my weaknesses? And do I want to do something about that? Or what do I want to do about that? And especially with the pace nowadays, I don't know that people stop and say, I'm going to take this time to just reflect on what I'm doing well, what I'm not doing so well, and decide what I want to do about it. So it has to be a very conscious effort. So I don't think that it just comes to you and say, oh yeah, you know what? I have a weakness and I need to work on that. Yeah. And I think part of the seeing that, and figuring out who to hire and how to hire somebody that really complements what your skill set is not only what are your strengths and weaknesses, but what does the organization need? So thinking about, okay, I'm not so good at that, but you know what? That's okay, because that's not where we're headed right now. We're headed in this other direction. So I need a strategic thinker that's going to help me get there. Yeah. So that's a moment where you have to stop and think, okay, let me evaluate me. Let me evaluate the culture I'm in. Let me evaluate the organizational needs. And I don't know a lot of people who spend time, because we are going from meeting to meeting to meeting. And there's a constant deadline. There's about 6 projects that need to be done by 4:00 today. Right. So you got to put aside some time to do that kind of thinking.
And that's why we're firm believers in building it into the process. Like it's got to be part of the process. It's got to be part of the day. And just a little plug here, but that's why it's great to have a coach, because that's some of what that work is that an hour every week or every other week, you are really doubling down on that, thinking about yourself and maybe thinking about the organization too. And I like how you bring up, thinking about it, what the department needs, what the organization needs, because then it is a little less personal. You don't have to, all these things that get in our way of being humble and not feeling like we could own what we're not awesome at. You could even put that aside. Like I am very confident that the reason I got my job at Kaiser as an executive consultant was because I had such a strong project management background. And the department was awful at that. And they really needed more of that based on where they were in their maturity. I guarantee you, my executive would never say she wasn't good at that. It's just not where she wanted her attention to be. It's not what needed her attention. So she brought somebody in who really could have that lens and get stuff done, with that framework and more with that mindset. But,
well, and you're right. I mean, the having the coach, or whether it's a weekly engagement or something less frequent or whatever the cadence is, gives them that time. And, one of my constant frustrations is we spend a good amount of effort coming up with visions, missions, charters, and it's all, we sit in rooms with offsites with Post-it notes and whiteboards and we do this thing, and it's all good. There's a lot of energy. So it's all good stuff. And then we never come back to it. Yeah. So we've created this beautiful mission that, of course, you have to get everybody to buy in on, and everybody has to be represented in some way. So they end up being really lengthy instead of, I think, what a good mission should be, which is something pithy that you can remember and that you can hang your hat on and that you can cascade to the team and they can really say, yeah, I get it. It resonates. But the point is, we do spend time, and we're actually going through that now with launching some new projects, and they want all the projects to have a mission and a charter. And I'm not trying to say that I'm against it. I think it's a very good exercise, but I don't know that it's such a useful exercise when it then sits on a shelf and nobody ever goes back to it.
Yeah. Something that you said earlier, and it kind of brings this thought to mind, is that, sure, Kaiser is no different. Most organizations are in crisis mode. They're in survival mode. It's, oh my gosh, the roof is on fire and now we're all trying to run to put it out. And so there's never really this great opportunity to get into thriving mode, which is where all the good stuff happens. It's all the innovation and creativity and all of that. And it kind of goes to that point, right? Is we have this mission statement. Can we link all the work that we're doing back to this mission statement? If we can, the work has got to go. Get us out of this survival mode. If we just eliminated some of the noise that we think is the most important stuff, but when you really try to drive it back to the mission, back to your true north, no one can make the connection. It's just a thing that came from it. We were in survival mode, then someone had some idea, and then it's like, run, go do that, because that's gonna, and imagine that happening 30 times a day. And now you've got teams that are like, well, because a lot of times it's the same teams too, right? This has to hit your desk, Valerie, as chief of staff. Like, okay, there's 30 things. Which one am I running on this week, right?
Well, right.
So, I wonder, maybe the question really is, Valerie, how can an organization begin to move itself out of this survival mode so that there is this opportunity to really truly think about what the mission is and get the teams working in a level of thriving, in a thriving mode?
Boy, if I knew the answer to that, I think I'd probably be in a different role, but I think it's absolutely the right question. And the scenario you described, it feels like, I want to say 4 years because that's the space of time when I feel been in overdrive with that, because then we all got sent home in March of 2020. Everything changed and we were truly in survival mode. Literally, right? We all got vaccinated. We were wearing masks. Everything was survival mode for sure. But what happened was there was a ton of extra stuff that was layered on top of the work that was already being done. And I don't think it stopped. And so we're really, really bad at saying no to things, because every idea, every project that comes along is like, oh, that's great, let's do it. But we have the same number of people to do that much more work. And I think the problem with this constant survival mode, it's exhausting for the staff. It's exhausting for everybody. Everybody, right? And you never get a moment to take a breath and do any kind of self-reflection or think about what your mission is or think about how this project is connected to that mission. And I feel like there's no end in sight. And the real problem is, attrition, right? So people will leave because they can't stand it anymore. And I see that. I see people taking interesting alternatives. So I'm just going to take a year off, or I'm going to quit this and I'm going to go open a B&B. A very close friend who did that recently. And I thought, wow, that's a big change. But and also a ton of work, by the way. So there's no less work, but it's different, right? It's very focused. And I know what my job is. I know who my customers are. I know what I need to do.
Well, when it's yours, you have more control over it. So I think that's the biggest thing that we see in, organizations, that people just feel like they're being told what to do and don't have any control over their work. And nobody likes that. Kids don't like that, right? That's part of parenting.
No, and I used to have this lovely dog, my English Springer Spaniel, who was a wonderful dog, but also a little ADHD kind of thing. So, I'd throw a tennis ball and he would know where to go and get the tennis ball. You throw 2 tennis balls, all of a sudden, he's looking back and forth and he's trying to figure out, but he'll figure out. You throw 3, all of a sudden he just stops dead in his tracks and he doesn't know what to do. So imagine throwing 30 tennis balls out there. And so I feel sometimes like I'm like my Springer Spaniel. I don't know where to look next and what to focus on because there are too many balls being thrown at me.
Yeah. That's right. The funny thing, and not more probably ironic. We're running to try to achieve this thing. And now you've got attrition. So now, whoops, we got to slow down because now we got to get people back. And so between the people burning out, it's actually costing, time. It's actually costing really hard dollars too. Right. So it's like, at some point you would think, hey, someone's got to see that this is not working, right? Either from the attrition numbers, from not hitting financial goals, from not hitting, maybe it's even, in process goals that we look at. At some point you'd think there would be enough hands raised, like, why, at least to just ask the question, why do we think we're struggling here, right? It's fascinating because it seems, again, your organization mirrors so many in that everyone has their foot so slammed on the gas that they forget, like, at some point, everybody at some point, everybody has to stop, even if it's just to go get more gas, like, or charge your car. No one can maintain that pace.
I haven't done it, and I'm sure somebody probably has done it, but I was thinking about quantifying the cost. So when somebody leaves, right, you've got to post a position, we've got to interview, which takes a whole bunch of people. You got to put a committee together. So they're spending some time. You select that candidate, then you've got to onboard that person. So we typically take about 3 months from the posting to the recruitment, the interviewing, the hiring, and the onboarding. So that's 3 months of lost time, that if we had retained the employee who left in the first place, that employee could have kept working. And also the whole team of people who had to be involved in the posting, recruitment, interviewing, and hiring, they were taken away from other work that they might have been doing. And we currently have in my department of 550, 36 open roles. So we've got that many teams and managers and people involved in the hiring process. So if they're involved in the
rule of thumb is 6 months of a salary.
Yeah.
Well,
so you can multiply that by 36, and there's your number.
And I would argue, even look at your production numbers. Look at what, because that work has gone somewhere. In a lot of cases, it hasn't just stopped. So now you've probably compounded your problem, right? So now someone's taken on some more work. Now they also feel overwhelmed and burned out. And the reality is, for an organization, this might be my opinion. The reality is, for an organization, it might be better that a person actually quits because they feel overwhelmed. The worst part for me is the person who is like, I think for a while we were calling it quiet quitting.
Yeah.
I am doing no more than I have to do, right? Like, I am barely showing up here. So I think to calculate, you also got to look at what is the impact on the people now doing this work. So you talked about a whole group that is very expensive. I would also be looking at numbers like unplanned absences. Those are people who are like, no, thank you. It's true. Rachel, you and I went down this road for a minute trying to do a calculator. And that was
but they're out there, and 6 months of the salary is a good rule of thumb. Because it does take into, it's not just, the onboarding also is 90 days after the person's hired, right? That they're not super productive. But even if you just, those 6 months of somebody's salary is pretty conservative, taking into account all the people that you have to pull in, all the other, if you really do want to try and quantify it. But it's a hard one, and every organization is different. So that's why there's not one number, but if you could use 6 months, that tells the story.
I think, it's presenting that calculation and saying, this is what we're losing. And then also balancing it with, the things that we try to do for people. So, we have people programs that are meant to improve morale, manage workload, show people that they're appreciated, all good stuff. Nobody will say those are not good things to do. However, when we've got the 30 different balls in the air and we do have to prioritize because we can't possibly do that many things, the things that most often fall off are those things that have to do with staff and staff recognition, the nice things we used to do for people to show appreciation. It's like, okay, well, that can wait, right? Because that's not essential. However,
that's not bringing the revenue in. That's not the direct correlation to the revenue, although we've dissected that it is.
Yeah. So, the things that back in the day, right, when we were downtown Oakland, one of the teams used to do is on Friday afternoons, they had a volleyball net down at the park. There's this little park near one of the buildings, and they would just go play volleyball and they would order pizza, and it would just be this nice thing. I mean, of course, the pandemic changed that, but even without it, that's the kind of thing that would sort of drop off because it's not bringing in any revenue, and people need to be in their cubicle, heads down, doing their work. And so we drop those things. And then the result is the attrition, which again this is a spiral, right?
Yeah. I love when you start to talk about things like what Rachel and I do, coaching, when you start to talk about these really fun programs, what I call them, right? These like community, these connecting programs, these opportunities for people to actually not be working in that context. And those are always in the nice to have. Well, that would be nice to have, but we're in crisis mode now. Oh, but budgets. Oh, but, it's kind of like the concept of sales aren't coming in, so we're going to cut the marketing budget. And that was always one of those, like, that's how you get more sales. How we keep people motivated to continue to work is by supporting all of these things that we recognized were important and put money towards. They're still important. It doesn't end.
And especially something like that, especially those community activities, the connection points, like that actually makes the work get done better.
Yes.
It makes the work get done easier. You're out there. We know that being outside generates creative thinking. So you're around all these people that you do the work with, and you can't help but ideate. You're just doing it.
Yeah,
so you are still working. It's not a waste of time. We're not like, we're goofing off Friday afternoons. Like, we got to start thinking about that as part of the work, just as important to make
and sometimes we need to goof off, and that is part of the process. That's part of the process as well. But to your point, a group of colleagues get together. I can't think of a time where a group of all of us colleagues got together and at least 50% of the conversation wasn't about work.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think to your point, Friday afternoon, it's funny. We had an initiative, I want to say a couple of years ago, where that we said to everybody, Friday afternoons are meeting-free zones. So no Friday afternoon meetings. And the purpose is to give you creative time. So time to think, time to ideate, time to maybe connect with a colleague on a project that you've been, sort of a background project you've been plugging away at. A fun project, right? So something that it would just be one of those nice to haves, but the nice to haves are important too.
Fulfilling.
And then over time, what's happened is it's just sort of fallen away because, look, you've got Friday afternoon, a whole block of free time on your calendar. I'm going to start putting meetings on the calendar. So slowly but surely, Friday afternoon, creative, do a fun project that you haven't had a chance to do time has disappeared.
Yeah.
Set yourself up for success the next week so you go into the weekend actually able to enjoy your weekend.
No, one of the things
you don't want to do that.
I worked for a hospital system out in Los Angeles, and one of the things, and actually it's interesting because when something is supported by your executive leadership, your CEO believes in it, then it all seems to work out fairly well. And this CEO was particularly adamant about these processes. And one of them was standard work. And that was block time on your calendar that was meant for, it could be used in one of two ways. It was meant for creative time or for you to get out of your office and go and visit with your staff and go and make those types of connections. You couldn't schedule a meeting. As a matter of fact, the calendars were blocked. You weren't permitted to put some kind of level of meeting on the calendar at that time. It's a funny thing once there's a value to that, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden in that organization, employee engagement scores went up, patient experience scores went up, financial numbers went up. It changes the dynamic. So the idea that no, we can't waste this time. I'm like, well, the data doesn't really bear out that those are wastes of time. Even if it is, I'm talking about the Real Housewives of the Potomacs or I don't know, whatever, even if it is, we're not necessarily talking business. It turns out by taking those moments, you end up getting more out of your entire organization, not less.
And I'm wondering too, how much additional stress that whole Friday afternoon time actually created for our admin staff. So here was the issue, right? It's like, okay, we're going to block the calendar on Friday afternoon so people can have this time. However, we're not going to reduce anything else that needs doing or change deadlines to give people a little bit more time. So I did feel for our admin staff, because I had so many of them coming and saying, I'm so sorry. I don't want to do this. I want to respect this time, but my boss needs this, or I need this meeting must happen before the 1st. And there's no other time. I'm so sorry. I have to do this. So there has to be, yes, the leadership support, which they ostensibly did support. But then also what goes with that is, okay, if I'm going to block this time, then I'm going to be very aware when I say I need these 6 things due by next Wednesday. How is that going to get done?
That's right. Yeah.
And give people that relief, because I did see almost an increased level of stress where people saying, okay, now we still have all of this to be done and we're missing a whole half of a day in which to do it.
Kind of in essence means leaders weren't supporting it, because you have to be looking at this thing 360, right? I'm just making it up. You're going to give everyone 1 day a week off. Well, that's reducing the amount of actual time that people have to work. So obviously you would then need to
reduce work
and reduce the amount of things that you're doing. Yeah. And as it stands today, again, all data driven, organizations are incapable of working on as many projects as they are. We see it constantly. Either stuff doesn't get done. It's like projects get started and they just never quite move to fruition. So someone's time and energy and excitement and all this stuff sort of is like, okay, we're going to stop that. You're going to move over to this. Or you really can't get to the essence of trying to even solve a problem, because it's like, I'm here. Just what we talked about, maybe full circle on this meeting, right? Is you can't go from meeting to meeting and be effective. You're just not going to be as productive. You need almost this moment of like, decompress, especially like I'm going to, again, chief of staff role that's got it's so dynamic. You need to decompress off the last meeting. You're not even going to be probably in the same ballpark in the next meeting. So now it's like, you've got to get your brain a chance to even adjust to this new, okay, now I got to prepare for this thing over here. So even for, and I would argue this can go across the board, but in your role in particular, it's very difficult. The brain just doesn't function and operate like that. It probably can for a short period of time, but
Well, I want to say it's the energy project, but I'm not quite sure if that's the right one, because we've had these different sessions come through where they talked about multitasking as a myth, that you can't really multitask, because we all claim to do it because we're in so many meetings, but yet we still have to keep up with email and projects and deliverables. So we do multitask, but really we're not multitasking. We are not doing any of those things very well because we're not focused on any of them. We're focused, one ear is listening to the meeting, basically listening for my name to be called so I can start paying attention, while I'm also finishing a report, while I'm also dealing with some emails and some Teams chats all at the same time. So none of those things are getting my full attention, really, because they're all
and inevitably
attention.
I know I've been in the situation. I am doing an email or someone's IMing me on the side and my name does get called. I hear my name, but I didn't actually hear what was leading up to my name. So now I've got to, I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, please? So we actually aren't you physically can't be aware of that and be aware of this and be aware of this. You pick one that you're aware of. And again, we talk about that. If you talk about it in the terms of processes, lean and waste. I'm sending this group of, 30 people on a call back through the question again, so I can actually hear it.
We take so much pride in that, though. Like, that's the thing. There's so much pride
multitasking
that comes into, look at all this that I got done today. I was able to be everything to everybody all the time, which, doesn't work. We're agreeing that it doesn't work. But one of the things, Valerie, I wanted to ask you, and I'm going to take us back to kind of the start of this, where you said, I've got a list of projects, I've got stuff that I've got to do, my roadmap, but I come in for the day and inevitably that doesn't happen. That stuff that you plan to do doesn't happen because you've got a list of other things. And I you sound very positive about that. Like, that seems like a good thing. one of the things that I see with clients, they'll come and say, I just never get to my stuff. And for them, it's not a positive thing. It actually makes them feel bad. Now, for me, like you're saying, this was one of the fun things I liked about it. I didn't know what today was going to be, and I was happy to be nimble and adjust and adapt. But for a lot of people, it isn't. So what advice would you give to somebody who's like, I didn't get to my list today?
It's constant reprioritization of things. So I have a to-do list that is constantly moving stuff up and down on that to-do list because of those urgent requests that come in. And I honestly don't know what the right solution is, but I do know that it does cause stress, because if you're not checking things off the list, but in a genuine way, not just like I'm checking it off just to check it off, and it doesn't feel good at the end of the day, it adds more stress, because you can imagine, right, as it grows and grows, like, whew, I'm never going to get to the bottom of this. I don't know what that looks like. And I read something recently about somebody, I know, it was one of these efficiency webinars, and she talked about clearing her email inbox every day and how good that felt. And I thought, first of all, I don't really know what that means, because you don't clear your inbox. I mean, you got, yes, maybe you read everything or discard things that don't need reading, but what does it really mean to do that? I was intrigued by it. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what it means. I don't know what it would look like. And I can only imagine what it might feel like. It's like, whew, like empty. That must feel really good. And it's the same with the to-do list. I have no idea what it looks like to have everything checked off and going forward. And, you talked about preparing for the week. For me, it's usually like a Sunday evening. I spend not a lot of time, but maybe an hour, because I like to be prepared on Monday. It's a good and bad thing, because there's a little bit of that, look at all the things I didn't finish. That's now just moved forward. It just advances. And that's how my to-do list works. It advances into the next week. And so in some ways, it's like, shoulders drooping, kind of dreading the rest of the evening, because I know what's in store for the week ahead. So if you guys have an answer for how to do that, I'd love to hear it.
So one, on email, which I don't do this, but I think this is actually a really good strategy, is never open an email twice. So once the email is open, there's a level of action to take on it. If that you have to respond to it, you respond to it right away. Maybe it is a forward because it's somebody else has to do, but essentially never open an email twice. That way you are functionally clearing it versus opening it and going back, which would be the waste. I'm still working on how that functionally works, but I have a number of colleagues who are able to keep their inboxes clear because they follow that kind of strategy. The second, is that you, Rach? Are you one of them? You and Michael, or you'll be buddies. I think on the second part, I think what concerns me always about the fires we're putting out every day and the list not getting done is two things. Why are we having fires every day? Again, we go back to, can we solve for that? Because that's not a normal state. That's a survival state. And then two, the other part, which is the really scary part for me, is most people will then end their day. Maybe it's a commute home. Maybe it's a go pick up kids. Maybe it's a fix dinner. It's a whatever that thing is. And then I slide into bed at night and I pop open my computer to see what I can bang out before, I poop dead tired and need to go to sleep. Either way, I think it presents itself a significant challenge, because we're back to that burnout piece, right? You're not getting any downtime. You're not getting any time to kind of be free and clear your mind, all of that good stuff. So I obviously in life, there's just going to be these times where you do have things and emergencies that come up that kind of throw your list off. The question is that a constant state? And if that's a constant state, we've got to go back to the why that's happening.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I do want to say, although I follow that approach, it's not that my inbox never has all unread stuff, but if there is something there to take action on, or just knowing that I want to monitor it, or, like there's nothing for me to do, I just want to keep an eye on it or whatever, then I don't open it, right? It's not we're not going back to it. So I do pride myself on like not having people who have 100 unread emails. When I see that, like I start to stress out. I'm like, how are you functioning? Like if I leave the week with like 4 unread that carry over into next week, that's about it. But
let's promise to never share inboxes.
Yeah, good. But the same approach for Friday afternoon is an approach I take for Monday morning. That hour Monday morning to block it off, and that's when I figure out what I need to do for the day to set myself up so I'm not interfering with my weekend. Like and that has taken some time to not think about it on Sunday night. You know, we all talk about the Sunday night ick. Most of us have it, you know, like, oh gosh, what's tomorrow going to bring? If I just do it right now, then I'll feel a little bit better. So I've really had to train myself to make it like, nope, I've set up this time Monday morning. That's when I'm going to think about it, and I'm going to try to enjoy, you know, what's going now, be in the present. Which also, you know, Andy, when you were talking about people coming back later in the day, you know, at night, going back to the email and stuff, it's never been a strategy that works for me. I know it definitely works for some people. But I think, like, what does that do to your present moment in picking up the kids or making the dinner, doing the thing? Like, are you really present, or are you thinking you still have stuff to do? I know I would be still thinking about what I have to do. The other thing with, like, the task list, and I like, Valerie, how you reframe that. Like, we have to get really good at knowing the priorities, you know, and that's the message we tell ourselves. Like, no, actually, it's not that I didn't get the stuff done and I'm a big old failure. It's that I'm able to adjust to the priorities. I'm nimble enough. I'm wise enough to know what's important now. And I'm very good at prioritization to shift stuff around. On the weekends, I still love a checklist. Like, I love to check stuff off. You know, everybody loves their list. And like, I don't know what that is about the human condition that we just like to check stuff off. But what I find too is I don't put everything on the list. So then I'm doing all this other stuff that still needs to happen, but it's not on the list. So now I make sure laundry on the list, hot tub chemicals on the list. And so I could have that sense of satisfaction, like, went to the dollar store.
The accomplishment. Yeah.
You know, yeah, because there's so much stuff that we don't, you know, that we're just doing and we don't give ourselves credit for. So there's a little bit of grace and appreciation for what it is that we are doing, and having that skill set to prioritize. It amazes me how many people don't, that's not something that comes naturally to them.
Yeah. I think, Andy, you're right. Humans need a sense of accomplishment. I mean, particularly if you're spinning this fast and this hard every single day, and you get to the end of the day or you get to the weekend and you feel that there's been nothing checked off of my list. I mean, whether it's an actual list or, you know, a list in your head, it feels like a defeat. Like I haven't really done anything. I mean, now it's one thing if you've been laying on a beach all week, and then okay, fine, that's all good. Right?
I got a tan that week, so I did something.
but if you're working, if you're really working hard and you're spinning, and you still feel like you haven't accomplished anything, that can't feel good, right? So there's nothing about that that's good for the human condition. So we need that sense of accomplishment of, I worked really hard, which is a good thing because look at what I accomplished. Or I laid on the beach, I got a tan, all good too, right? Yeah. But you got to get somewhere with this stuff. Otherwise, what are we doing? Yeah.
I think that's why Rachel and I love the concept of celebrations so much. You know, when you do your daily or weekly huddle, and it's like, let's talk about what we got accomplished. Let's talk about what the celebrations are. I will tell you, most people that I coach, when we start out, it's very difficult for them to think about what they've accomplished. They can only think about all the big list of the things they haven't done. Yeah. They can't actually audit through. Mm-hmm. Okay, you didn't do those 10 things, but you did these 75 things, you know, because oftentimes, like for you, you'll have your list written, but as the fires start coming in, you're now just worried about putting out fires. You're not actually probably documenting, I put out fire on this front and I put out fire on that front. And so at the end of the day, or even worse, the end of the week, it's very difficult to look back and be like, I got a lot of stuff done. This building didn't completely go up in smoke, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So we love the concept of celebration and really focus on that. And I'm going to go full circle again, back to promoting the work that you're doing. If you're just putting out fires and you're forgetting to tell people, think about you forgot the work that you did. They're definitely not going to remember it. And so it's really important then that we do highlight those things. Nothing is small.
So what do you say this? So for somebody like me, who you hinted at this earlier, is uncomfortable with that. And this is a big deal. And we've talked about this, I think, Rachel, in other coaching contexts about, personal brand and self-promotion. But I don't know if it's cultural or maybe it's, being a woman or all of these things, but it's definitely not an area that I'm comfortable with at all. Not comfortable saying, hey, look at what I did, or hey, can somebody acknowledge me? It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel comfortable. It doesn't feel natural. So what do you say to somebody who in our culture, absolutely, I recognize you need to do that, because nobody's going to come and do it for you. But if it isn't a natural state for you, how do you get there?
So part of that is working the muscle. All right, we do have to get more comfortable with it. And if you can identify it for yourself and put value on, like this practice of every day, writing down 1 or 2 things that you made happen, not waiting for the quarterly performance review and having to do that, reflective thing. And it's part of the process and it goes in a file that nobody ever talks about. But, and even in the executive meetings, when everyone else is given a status update, what are you giving your status update about? And part of too, what I tell folks who maybe work in an organization where people don't know what they do, what is your brand? What is that roadshow packet that you're taking around saying, hey, how can I help you? How can I be of service to you in your department? And here's all the things that I do. And they go, oh, yeah, here's all the things that I do. I do think if we're able to give it to ourselves a little bit more, and showcase for ourselves every day, like this is what I did, we might not need it at the same level from other people. That's not to say we don't need it at all. We definitely do. We definitely need to be recognized, but make sure when all these programs are happening around us, we're in the mix. And even, especially for you, Valerie, you're in such a great spot, I think, and you do this with your team, make sure that when you're recognizing them, you're doing it broadly, right? Setting that role modeling so other people are seeing like, yeah, actually we recognize the behind the scenes stuff too. So it's not just about the revenue generating stuff. You've got a whole team of people who support all this. They need to see it from you too.
And it's easy for me to quote them because, that's far more comfortable for me is to highlight the team and their work because they are extraordinary and they do fantastic things. But it's, the personal part, it's a little bit more of a struggle for me.
Yeah. And doing that broadly, right? Like in the 500 person organization, and then people will see that this behind the scenes stuff needs to be valued and appreciated as well. And then they'll start to do it. I do think that is contagious. You've got to be the change you want to see, as Gandhi said,
Yeah, so, I agree with Rachel. And I like to frame it as wins, right? It's like when we run these big projects, everyone would love to come in and talk about all the problems, but it's like, okay, we're going to start with wins. Let's start with wins. Round robin, 1 win for the week, right? And again, it depends on the size of the teams and blah, 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 because you can pick and choose, but let's everyone talk about 1 win. That also gives you the opportunity to share a win without feeling like, hey, I'm standing up in front of the group and let me tell you what I did. That's not it. It's really everybody's going to be responsible for sharing a win at some point in this process. And that can also help you, as Rachel said, work that muscle, right? To make sure we're jotting those things down, make sure, we're creating that space for ourselves as well.
Yeah. And in those coaching conversations, we get into what is it that's making it so difficult, right? What is it what's that voice in your head that's saying like, don't do that, don't say that, don't be like that, I mean, I tell folks all the time, they're like, well, I don't want to be an egomaniac. I don't want to be a narcissist. I'm like, it's never possible for you to do that. You've already thought about it. So it's just not possible for you to show up like that. So even if you're like, hey, this thing over here was super challenging, but look how I made it work. You're going to do it in a way that is authentic to you because you think about it. That's your intention. Your intention isn't to be like, look at me. Your intention is to be like, look at this cool thing that I contributed to.
That's right.
Oh, that's great perspective. I've never thought about it that way. That if you even have the thought, then you're not going to be that person that you don't want to be.
You're not a narcissist. If you were a narcissist, you'd be like, "Hello, world. Do you see me?" You wouldn't think. I think sometimes we, particularly women, I think certainly women of any kind of color, it is always like you're lucky to be in the room, so I'm just going to be quiet because I'm lucky to be here. That is not it. You're not lucky to be there. They're lucky to have you there. And by the way, let me show you why you're lucky. You have made a great investment, sir. Look at the things I've done, right? It's that kind of, I think disposition we have to start having, because we all like to just cower in the corner because they told us we need to cower in the corner, right? You don't get to sit at the big table. But you're sitting at the big table.
That's why I mean, I mentioned culture, and that's what you're getting at. For me, being Asian too, I think that's a big part of it. So being woman, being Asian, being in a world where, there aren't a ton of people who look like me at the table. And it doesn't feel okay to say, hey, I'm over here in the corner, pay attention to me. Yeah, and, that's a lot, that's learnings from childhood, is that you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. So listen more than you speak. Never beat your own drum, because it's just not okay to do that. And so it's hard to divorce yourself from those lessons of childhood.
It totally is, which is why, again, we go back to, it's a muscle you gotta work, because it's not comfortable. You don't have practice in it, but it will become more natural the more you do it. And yes, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you still have 1 mouth.
Yeah. Yeah.
So use it.
Yeah.
Well, Valerie, thank you so much for joining us. So fun. We hope we'll come back and chat with us some more. Always a pleasure, and thank you. We'll talk to you next time.
Wonderful to meet you, Andy.
Wonderful to meet you as well. Thank you so much. This was such an inspiring conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, guys.
All right, till next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.